Yo, what's up, guys? Todd from Zeotag.com, and I'm super excited to have Will Curran here today from HelloEndless.com, Endless Events, and we're going to be talking about events and event production in this new world that we have, what the difference is between live events and virtual events, and really the key differences between not just live streaming but hosting a true virtual event. What are the mistakes people are making in this new transition? What are some key tips that he has, maybe some software he's going to drop in on us, and how you can really make the most of virtual event opportunities. And of course, if you are recording your events and putting them online, you need a Zeotag account. Head over to Zeotag.com to sign up for a free version or upgrade to Pro, and you'll be able to auto transcribe your videos, make them fully searchable, and add an actionable table of contents so that searching and navigating all of your event videos is a seamless experience for your attendees. And now, without further ado, let's bring in Will. Will, welcome
Todd,
to the show, man. Thank you
so much. No, I'm so happy to be here. What an intro. Super duper excited. I'm definitely ready to drop the knowledge bombs all day long for your audience.
That's what I'm talking about. All right, so let's kick it off. Let's give a little background on who you are, what you do, and all the magic you create for people.
Yeah, for sure. I swear one of these days I'm going to record a video where I tell my whole story of how I started my company and lead up to today and all these things like that. So that way I can just be like, when I go on a show, I can say, hey, I just watched that video and get caught up. Yeah. But here's the one sentence bio. It's probably going to be in 2 sentences. Started my company in high school when I was 17, DJing backyard parties.
Nice.
Then eventually realized that we could hire big production speakers and lights and stuff to do crazy dance parties for high schools and colleges. Started doing that for a while, taught, and during that entire time of hiring production companies, I learned everything about production, light, sound, video staging, what it takes to put on a crazy technical experience for an event. Well, along the way, I realized, man, I really enjoy this technical production stuff more than I enjoy the DJing, and honestly, that's where all the money's at and where people find value anyway. So if people find value, I enjoy it way more, and it makes more money. It makes sense to kind of make that switch. So made that switch and started doing event production for really big events all over the country, essentially, and doing these large-scale productions. We slowly started focusing our niche in on corporate events and things like conferences and meetings, because that's where those a very expectations were extremely high, but also at the same time, people really wanted great customer service. So that's what we focused on. So we did, event production for large scale corporate events for years and years and years. And, up until, along the entire way, people are asking us to do live streams and asking us then to manage their event apps and, all the technical, basically became an event technology company.
Yeah.
And then, obviously in the 2020, the year that I think everybody knows in history now is the year that coronavirus hit, everybody went in online, and physical events became illegal to do. So people had to find a way to bring people together to still do all the same objectives they have, to educate, to allow people to network, to create memories, to whatever it may be, entertain. Yeah. And they had to do all that over the internet. And that's when really things got absolutely crazy at Endless. And, we saw probably a 4,000% increase in business overnight.
Oh, man.
I know that's a high
Yeah.
number. Will loves to exaggerate too, but it was definitely we got hit capacity very, very quickly on what we were capable of doing and grew very, very fast from it. But yeah, now we basically produce virtual events. So when it comes to whether it's doing a conference or you have a charity live stream or you're looking to have a concert digitally, we do it all. And it's the same concepts of doing what's doing in person, just brought online, and just using it instead of using a venue, you have a website.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I simplified though because it's what I do for a living. But
of course, yeah. So you say it's the same thing offline and online, but I think traditionally, at least in the conversation that I've been having with people, I'm not in the event industry necessarily, and so when I hear people thinking of we need to do it online, they're like, oh, do we use we'll do it on Zoom and we'll do a Zoom thing, right? So I imagine that's not the right way to go about it, right? So lay down the kind of fundamental idea of what putting a virtual event together is like to most mimic what an in-person event is like.
Right. So I think that's a great question, because I think far too often people fall into the trap of jumping straight into the technology. It's like when someone comes to you and says, I'm so busy, I have so much to do. What's the best project management software I should use? And you're like, well, there's 30 of them out there, right? Like, well, if you have a team, maybe Asana. Oh, if it's just your personal task, maybe Todoist, right? There's like all these ways, like 300 ways to skin a cat kind of thing. And I say that because I have 3 cats, so it's okay. They're not they're not trembling in their boots quite yet. But when it comes to virtual events, far too many people are like, yeah, like what's the best platform out there? Or they just way worse is that, oh yeah, you know what? I've heard of Zoom. Let's just do it on Zoom. Right. And I think the problem is that people aren't taking a step back. That's like walking in saying, I have an event tomorrow. Let's do it at the most expensive resort in the state. Or, hey, I'm going to have an event tomorrow. We should just do it in the park. Yeah. And I think people kind of get the idea when they think of physical events because they're like, yeah, like, right? You wouldn't put, for example, grandma's 100th birthday in the finest resort in the country, right? At the same time, though, you also wouldn't put the C-level executive marketing conference in the middle of the park. Right. You have to find the perfect venue for which it's happening. And I think that, like, for example, when people think of virtual events, you think of, Zoom, because it's what we've all heard of. But the problem is that we have massive Zoom fatigue, right? We all don't want to sit on video calls and just stare at a screen. You have to somehow recreate that same experience of what you had in person, where you walked in, you got badge put around your neck, you bumped into your friend that you haven't seen in 2 years. There's music playing. Oh my gosh, there's these great taste experiences of food. How can you recreate that online? And it takes a level of production value and production understanding that I think people kind of get stuck in and you definitely won't be able to accomplish the same way on even a YouTube live stream, let alone a Zoom call. But there's definitely some complexity to it for sure.
Yeah, and with those streams, like, when people jump into like a video stream, that doesn't bring the event. That just brings like the stage content to the people. But how many times do you hear people talking about they go to conferences and they don't even go into the stage rooms and they're just in the hallways networking or whatever it is, right? So what are some options that people have when it comes to creating, like you just said, like walking in, getting the badge? Like, how does something like that happen virtually?
Yeah, so I mean, like, it starts online with the experience that you have on the website, like, right? And event websites have existed for years; they still exist, right? But having a great website that someone can go to that captivates them and gets them excited is like the first start. It's like kind of like the teaser for why they should attend, right? That stuff is easy. The next step, though, is like the portion of them signing up. Far too many times do people just want to be like, yeah, you know what, let me just like collect, some very simple information on this person, like first name, last name, email address, and put your credit card information in. But that registration process is so critical because it now, being online, allows you to do a couple things. So, for example, for all of our marketers out there, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening that, for example, you can cookie somebody as soon as they've registered. So imagine having a cookie database on the browser. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to cookies, it's totally okay. So bear with me. But when you stick a cookie on the browser, now you can track that person everywhere they go. So imagine, they just registered for your event. They're probably your biggest advocate to sell more tickets. So why don't you start showing them ads that say stuff like, hey, invite your buddy Todd to come join at the conference, and being able to get him excited, and maybe I can get Todd to register, and boom, now you get this kind of viral effect happening. But also as well, that registration is your first point of contact to collect data on somebody as well. So, if you're just only asking first name, last name, email address, okay, well, that's great if you get the company email address. You can probably determine the company off of it, things like that. But what if you could, for example, find out more information to help you better reach your audience in the future? Things like, for example, how much time do you expect to spend at our conference each day? An hour, 2 hours, 8 hours, whatever it may be. Why did you sign up for our conference, right? Collecting that data. Okay, so that's kind of the basics.
Here's a quick question. As a marketer, I know the more things you put on the form, the less likely people are to fill it out, right? So are you collecting this in multiple steps? Are you having one big form? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, it depends on the audience, obviously. But yeah, I would say maybe start. I think that's definitely a good thought process. Is like maybe start with the bare bones information you need to get that person registered. But then it's like you got to have some sort of like, okay, you're registered, you paid your content information. Now it takes them to another form that says, hey, let us best understand your needs and desires. Because like it's also a chance for you to collect data and build profiles on your attendees, because you want your attendees to build out solid profiles. It's kind of like the badge of the virtual corporate event, right? Like if I can say what company I'm at, what I'm interested in learning about, what kind of people I want to meet, then you can build up this database that allows attendees to also match with each other.
There we go.
Maybe even using some like, machine learning or AI, when it comes into it, to say like, hey, You like puppies. You're both in Arizona. Did you know you're in Arizona? You should meet, right? And that might be like something that that does that. But definitely when you collect that data, definitely finding a way to do it properly and step by step is probably really, really good. But also realizing too, what's the most critical, mission critical data you have to get on an attendee as well. So we're not even talking about like the event experience,
right,
except for a little bit.
Right? Yeah, we're really geeking out. I know we can go off. Both of us can go off the rails quick on this tech stuff. So we've gotten them registered and signed up. So now they're registered pre-event. What goes down for a virtual event?
Yeah, I mean, one of the best things that you can do too, as well, is like the best way you communicate sometimes like leading up to the event was always via email. It's still going to be that way, but your email's got to be exciting and get people really jazzed, right? Maybe, for example, building in some sort of like influencer marketing again, or some sort of some referral like process to get more attendees come. But let's say, for example, that all happens, get them excited, they're getting lots of emails, they're jazzed, they show up. Right? Before, it used to be they maybe showed up to the hotel or they showed up to the venue and they're like, boom, here's this experience that I got. Right? And like there'd be lights and there's signage. It was usually the excitement happens beforehand too, because you're like taking the bus and you start to see the signs like Dreamforce, and all these things. Like, oh my gosh, it's like Disneyland. We get closer and closer and closer. Well, you have to kind of do that also for your virtual event, and the fact that when they log in to enjoy the event, you have to have that build up. So then that way when they get in, it's not like a lull too. It's very exciting, right? There's something happening over here. There's all the people everywhere. Like imagine you were the first person to show up to an in-person event, right? It's always kind of awkward. You're just kind of like sitting there, what's going on? But hey, how can you maybe make sure that the experience is exciting? So if someone does log in an hour before, maybe there's music already playing on the live stream that they're going to tune in for the general session. Maybe they have the option to watch a couple videos on demand before they log in. Maybe even using geotags where they can find out where the best stuff is.
There we go. Oh yeah.
But like giving the opportunity that like there's not a dull moment at all leading up to the event, I think is really, really important. But also as well, building a solid design and user experience. I mean, like where most people kind of forget when it comes to these virtual and digital events is that you're building a website. So why don't you have somebody who's an expert in building beautiful websites so that user experience looks great? Again, I'm not saying build this all from scratch. There's platforms that do all this. There's literally softwares that you plug in your schedule, you say where the live stream is, you embed your content, and you can connect other tools into it, and boom, there's a platform that exists for this. But you have to make it exciting all the way through. And I think one of the things that you can do as well is allow attendees to start connecting with each other leading up to the event as well, because that's one of the best parts, and reason why I think people are so nervous about virtual and digital events is they're just worried it's gonna replace the in-person experience, and that they're worried that virtual can't beat the in-person experience of meeting each other. But like Todd, you and I haven't met in person yet. We've only met digitally, but I would still consider us to have just as close a relationship as if we had met at a conference in person for an hour or just over at a bar or something like that. And so I think people need to have the ability to connect with each other. Again, that's where maybe like that AI matchmaking can kind of happen in networking. But allow attendees, I think, leading up to the event to connect. Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. I'm all over the place. There's so many tips I have.
I know. No, it's great. So you mentioned so we set this up. They're connecting ahead of time. You mentioned that there's platforms out that you can plug in where the live stream is. Now, let me ask you this: live versus recorded. Why or why not?
Oh man, depends. I think the best is a mix. You definitely, no matter what, all live content has to be recorded. That's like no brainer. That's why these guys should know that by the time they're probably coming on yours, right? But I think that far too often that also everyone tries to figure out how to shoehorn all their content live when really some of it can be pre-recorded. So here's the best way I have, there's like branch logic, and there's a million different ways this can go. But let's use this simple branch logic real quick. So let's say, for example, you have a presenter. Are they engaging live? Let's start with that. If they're boring and then, whatever it may be, you need to ask yourself the question, am I going to keep it or cut it, right? If you're going to cut it, you should cut it if it's boring content, and also as well, it's not even interesting content, right? Yeah. It's like it would have been a dud, right? It'd probably been one of your lowest rated sessions anyways. Just get rid of it, right? No one has time for fluff anymore. Only give them the best stuff. If the content's still good, right? Let's say, for example, I've done so many conferences here. They're super dry presenters, like accountants, lawyers, right? Like, no offense to anyone who's an accountant or lawyer watch this, by the way, but a lot of times they have really good information. It's just dry.
Yep.
So if, for example, let's say someone's giving a presentation on like the financial updates of the industry, where all the money's going, where it's being spent, the trends, and it's just super dry, maybe pre-record it. Pre-record it because someone can listen to it at their own speed. They can skip over to the parts they want, all those things like that, right? But you do not want to have dry, boring content live because people are just going to be like, I don't care how good this is. I'm just tired. Let's go watch Netflix. Let's go play at the cat. Right? Not good. Yeah. However, the people who are engaging, sometimes too, I will totally admit this because I'm a presenter who I consider okay engaging. I like to think I'm engaging. But sometimes the content I share is not groundbreaking. It's not like anything crazy new. But I get high remarks because of my delivery, my energy levels, my excitement, all those things like that. That stuff needs to be live. So what I think is the best answer to your question is you got to find that mix of what it's going to look like and make it so when people are tuning in live, they are like glued into the computer and they just literally can't leave because they're just so excited and they are hanging on every word that the presenter is having.
And so, all right, now with that, as an attendee, whether someone's recorded or not, if they're super engaging, I'm going to be, on the edge of my seat paying attention. Now, what can people do to take advantage of being live during a conference that makes it easy to ask questions maybe or keep people engaged? Because as it's probably 10 times easier to zone off or check your phone and scroll through Instagram when you're watching something on your computer versus when you're sitting 20 feet from a stage where the guy can look at you and give you the death stare like, I see you on you, right? So like, what's a good way to capitalize on being live during a virtual event?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up such a good point about like the pressure. You have the presenter looking at, but you also have your peers looking at you too. So imagine you usually when you go into a session or go watch something, right? Usually you're going in with a friend. So like, for example, imagine paying $100 to go see Tame Impala, one of my favorite bands, play live, right? If I invited one of my friends and said, hey, come join me, he paid $100, and we show up to the concert, went, and we're sitting in the middle of the audience, and he's just texting on his phone the entire time, you'd be like, dude, get in the moment, man. This is a concert. Come on, right? But in virtual, imagine Tame Impala's playing virtually, and you said, hey, dude, come pay $100, come join me, watch Tame Impala virtually. He'd be like, okay, cool, comes, joins, right? And he's bored and starts texting. I don't have the ability to, like, punch him and say like, hey, pay attention. Right? If we're both pure virtual, there is like a hybrid hub and spoke models, but we can get to that a little bit later. So what can you do to captivate this? First thing you need to do is give audience members and attendees the ability to choose their own level of engagement, right? I think far too often we just assume, like, I'll use this as a great example because I've been presenting a lot virtually, is that they'll be like, yeah, we have just the Q&A panel. Like, cool. So is that the only way the attendee can at all interact, is just shoot things in the Q&A? Like, yeah. They want to get their questions answered. That's the only thing they want. I said, no, it's not. Not all people watch just to ask questions. Right. Some people will watch and just dead stare at the screen. My monitor is right over here. That's why I look over this way. But some people want to collaborate, right? So what I do in my presentations is that whenever I come in and speak, and I stole this idea actually from Noah Kagan. I got to start giving him credit for this. Noah Kagan basically came in and said, hey, here's a bunch of different things I do. And one of my favorite tips he ever gave is every presentation he does, he opens up a Google Doc. And he posts a Google Doc in the chat, and it's blank. And he makes it available for anyone to edit. They don't have to request to edit, anything like that. Just open. And he says, write whatever you want in there. Collaborate, put whatever. I usually start off by putting a note telling everyone to write whatever they want, because sometimes people get in, they see a blank document, and they're like, I don't want to mess it up. But then I'll put like one line saying collaborate, take notes, blah, blah, blah. Then I write my contact information, and then I just give blank space. People write insane notes. However, if you told me that there was a Google Doc open, I wouldn't be taking notes inside of it. I would want that doc for afterwards, though. Right. But you can see that everybody has their own way in using it. So you need to have a chat available for all those people who are chatty and want to, heckle the speaker or laugh with it or give praise, whatever it is, right? You want some thumbs up buttons so someone can like give emoji reactions. You need to have the ability for some people to ask Q&A. Some people need to upvote Q&A. Some people might actually want to turn their webcam on and talk. So you need to give the ability for attendees to choose their own adventure when it comes to engagement. And that's the best way to do it. Rather than shoehorning and saying this is the only way you have to communicate, the only way you can connect, build the best path for those people moving forward, and they will naturally get engaged. Yeah, that's kind of, I think, the gist of it. Other ways that you can do it too is get people involved who understand engagement, understand the platforms too. Like, I think one reason why I like go nuts. Like if I ever do a Zoom webinar with people, like I'm not the biggest fan of Zoom, as I kind of said in the beginning, but I love this webinar platform because it has some features I absolutely adore. Like there's this raise hands functionality where like it's designed for people to raise their hands and you can be like, oh, I'll unmute you and put your camera on. You can ask a question. Well, I do it as a virtual wave. So I tell people, I'm like, all right, everyone see that button on there? Okay, on three, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then we all raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, go. Everyone raises their hands. I go, all right, now everyone lower their hands. And I go, and you just see the number go up and down as like a wave. Cool. And I understood that platform to how to do that, so it works really successfully for me. However, for someone who doesn't understand Zoom or know that feature exists, might not use it.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. That's a great tip. I like that, and I love Noah. He puts out great stuff. I'm definitely gonna tag him when we promote this. See if he comes over and watches. All right, so. We talked about the live versus recording. I love getting people engaged in those different ways and knowing the platform. Something we talked about before, like the in-person thing about networking. We talked about networking beforehand. You mentioned paying attention to breakout sessions or not. Talk to me about like how do breakout sessions, how can they work in a virtual event like this?
Yeah, so they're very difficult right now just because the technologies haven't quite caught up with them. But one thing that you want to be careful of is the temptation to say, let's put everyone in a room and give everyone the ability to talk or unmute, right? Sometimes that can work really well. For example, I was just literally on a presentation today talking to a planner, and they were saying that worked really well for them for an event. But it was a social event where they're like, hey, it didn't matter if someone dogs started barking because it was like a pizza and wine thing, whatever it was. But if you're taking some serious content and someone has the ability to unmute when the person just walks in and they forgot to mute themselves and there's noise and now the presenter's distracted, whatever it may be, yikes, not good. However, I think that what breakouts need to stay and that people are kind of shying away from it right now versus like, hey, let's just do a lot of live streams that reach the entire audience is that breakouts, what they afford for us is curated personalization paths through an event. So we talked about like choose your own adventure through the engagement, but also choose your own adventure through the entire event. You mentioned that there's some people who love to go to the general sessions. You and I are probably like that. We don't go to the general sessions. We're like, we'll watch the recording of it later.
Right.
I'm going to stay in the hallway and talk to every person I see that I want to talk to, right? Or, like for me, sometimes what ends up happening is like I'll go and speak at a conference. I might attend one breakout session of a friend and maybe one where I want to learn, and then I'll spend the rest of the time co-working in like the hallway. There's some people who are like, look, I'm just not even going to attend the conference the entire time. I'm only going to go to the socials. Yeah. But I think breakouts offer us this opportunity that it allows people to choose what content they want to get. A great example of this, of personalization and choice when it comes to an event is the Inbound conference, HubSpot's big Inbound conference. They have all these different tracks, right? Sales, marketing, service, HubSpot newbies, social media marketing, right? A million different tracks. And they all have sessions all going on all the entire time. But what it does is for example, if I were to attend Inbound today, I would probably be focused on sales because that's where my organization is really focused on this year. But, if I, for example, bought a ticket for my my head of marketing automation, she's going to be in all the advanced HubSpot ones like, okay, so how you turn this feature on to do this and this and this, right? And then I have a good friend, Alex Plaxton. He loves going to the general sessions where like Alec Baldwin's speaking, for example. If you ever get a chance to ask him about the Alec Baldwin story, but he goes to all the big general sessions and loves to live tweet during it. That's why breakout rooms are needed because it gives people the opportunity to find the exact content that they want. And I think that we are going to get to this day and age really, really soon where people need to start charging significant money for virtual events rather than just like $30 to come and attend and get a couple sessions, or, it's completely free, or it's only $100. Like Inbound used to cost $1,000 to attend.
Yeah.
Why is no one charging $1,000 and providing that level of production experience, that level of great content? And that's where someone's going to be like, yeah, I'll invest 100% to get that kind of content. Because right now I think, and this starts to get into, maybe a little bit more deep onto another topic, but virtual events, next big competitor for when it comes to content is going to be YouTube. Because it's like, why would I attend to pay for this pre-recorded sessions or whatever it is when I can get it on YouTube? So we're going to have to get to this point where how do we decide when do we release content to the public versus being private and all those things like that as well. But I know you had Shayna on as a guest in the past. I'm a fan that you first start by making it gated, make it exclusive to your event, and then slowly give out little clips to tease people on what it's like. But you got to give value to your attendees. That's the biggest thing that you can do right now.
Yeah, that's huge too. So another thing here, let me look at my list of questions as we're going all over. I'm jotting down things I want to bring back up. So
sure.
Let's talk about the length of a conference, a virtual conference. Like, it's one thing to go to a place for a full day, 9 to 5, or multiple days, 9 to 5. But am I going to sit in my office by myself watching the screen for 8 hours a day? Like, what's the right way to think about, like, okay, I host a large event once a year, and it's 9 to 8, and we have 2 stages going all day long, 80 speakers. It's nuts.
Wow.
We're not doing that this year, right? Like, we're trying to figure out what the game plan is going to be. Is it going to be multiple days where it's only like 2 or 3 hours a day, and you can check in on one of these different sessions or whatever? So, like, okay, how do we take what used to be a full day event or multiple day event? How do you see events successfully kind of migrating online when we don't want people just staring at a screen for 8 hours?
Yeah, for sure. So, quick answer to the first question. If I had to answer this question in one word, it'd be no. Right? Like the 8 hours day thing doesn't work anymore, right? Because before we used to have a captive audience where we'd fly people in, and the only thing for them to do was like they were on the hotel property or in the convention center. They literally, their choice was go to the conference or go to the beach. And everybody knew that if you went to the beach, like, you were the dude who skipped out on the conference. Where were you, right? And they'll give them crap for the rest of the year. There's so much social pressure on it. Now, if you give someone 8 hours of content, if I don't even show up, I could just not even show up. No one would care, right? So I think what people have to do is redesign it. Here's another fact for everybody. The longest that people are willing to sit in their chairs and watch content, max. This is not even talking about average or specific number for your attendees. Max, 30 minutes. People do not want to sit in their seats for longer than 30 minutes. So they want quicker, faster content on there. So that means instead of doing an hour-long presentation, with no Q&A, or even a 30-minute presentation with 30 minutes Q&A, whatever the mix is on there, instead it needs to be, here's a 15-minute presentation, 15-minute Q&A, white space. And white space is the idea that you give people completely blank space to do whatever they want. Here's the best part about that for virtual events. It gives people the ability to do what they want in their homes or within their lives as well. Check email, answer the Slack messages they missed over the last couple 30 minutes. But also as well, from a learning perspective too, these shorter bits of chunks gives time for them to absorb it into their brain and to take notes, to maybe implement something they just learned, all those things like that, right? Brain's probably running a million ways why white space is better, right? So where my kind of theory comes in, and kind of where I think events, virtual and even in-person events will get kind of this way, but definitely virtual events, is that you need what I call virtual event / life balance, or eventually virtual event life integration. So the idea behind this is that you need to design your event that someone could buy a ticket and not know what the dates are and not have to block out their calendar, and they can integrate the event as part of their lives. So here's a great example of this. Shorter talks, so then that way they can give breaks every once in a while to do things like walk the dog, to do things like, for example, answer Slack messages, answer emails, right? Before, when it came to in-person conferences, and everyone does this, they put on the out of office reply and they tell everyone, I'm out at this conference, see you later, I'll catch up later. But a lot of times we feel dread and we end up working anyways, right? But with virtual events, you don't have to have that. People don't have the luxury of saying, I'm going to block out this entire day, because the pressure feels so real, right? Imagine telling your wife and being like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you all day because I'm going to be in this virtual event. She'd be like, you work all day and still talk to me. You're going to talk to me, right? The kid's going to run in. Life is going to happen, whether you like it or not. How can you allow attendees to integrate it within their lives? Shorter content. I also love the idea of allowing attendees, when they do the networking sessions and scheduling, I want integration into my personal calendar. So then that way, if someone tries to schedule a one-on-one meetup with me, I can say that I don't have to say, I'm sorry, I'm busy. It just shows up that, Will has the 2 hours blocked out that he needs to do to take this team meeting he does every week during it. It's blocked out automatically. You can't schedule networking sessions. And I think that's when we're going to hit like virtual event nirvana, is with that virtual event / life balance, or virtual event life integration.
Yeah. I love that idea. And I love the smaller, the 30-minute cap. I'm reading Jim Quick's new book, Limitless, right now. And he actually talks about how you should read how to learn better through reading, and you should only read for 25 minutes at a time. There's a whole bunch of science behind the reason, but you're more likely to remember things in the beginning, and you're more likely to remember things at the end. And so by cutting something to 30 minutes, you have a 7-minute beginning and a 7-minute end. You're going to remember 14 minutes out of the gate. And so you've immediately, you're comprehending more of the stuff, right? And so, and then, he goes deeper into all the different reasons. That was like a one obvious one that jumped out. So I think being able to have sessions at 30 minutes, 25 minutes like that is awesome. And I also think, the biggest value left on the table for most events is that you go to an event, you spend 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, you spend all day, all multiple days at this event, you're jazzed up, you're psyched, you have this notebook full of ideas, you go back to work the next day, you talk about it with some people, and then it doesn't happen, right? Like nothing happens. And so I think that white space is a great time to either review and recap what just happened, pull out those ideas that you want to take action on, and start, put the first step in action so you can build momentum towards getting value from what you learned. I think that's a huge thing. Or sharing the ideas. Another key thing in comprehension is like teaching what you learn. And so taking that, recap your notes, maybe sharing with your team or whatever, but having that break, I think, to let your subconscious do some work, take some action, I think is huge in getting more value for your attendees.
Preach.
All right, so you talked about a whole bunch of great ideas and ways people should be executing on these virtual events. Now let's talk about tools. All right, we started off saying the first thing you should think about is not the tools, right? But we've come up with a bunch of ideas and strategies that people, our event producing friends here can start thinking about and designing better virtual events to mimic as closely as possible. So now, for everyone like myself who just knows of Zoom, right, what are the options available, and what should we just start, like, open the rabbit hole for us to go down, and what we should think about and what tools we should look at?
Definitely. Well, I'll start off by being a little bit self-promotionist, sure. But something for everyone to be aware of is, as I start to list out these tools, if it sounds complicated, it sounds overwhelming, it's the same way with your other events that you when you said I need catering, you didn't go out there and try to figure out how to put the pastries together yourself, or you didn't make all the sandwiches yourself. You hired a catering company to do it for you, and they advised you on what was good, gave you suggestions, and then you made the decision around what you wanted, and they executed, right? Same idea with virtual events. Virtual event production companies are what you're looking for when it comes to this. If you aren't sure what platform to use or what technology to use, they're the ones who are going to help you think about these sort of things. They should also, in my opinion, think strategically about it as well, into the why. Why do your attendees need to be there? All those things like that before they even implement a platform for you as well. But let's definitely talk about tools for sure. So first thing that I would recommend, I'll recommend one specific tool for doing a very, very simple style virtual event, and that is an app called StreamYard. StreamYard is what we use to actually produce our weekly video talk show called Event Icons. It's 4 years running now, video podcast where we interview the icons in the events industry. Essentially, the concept behind the show is Ask Me Anything with people who behind, the planners of Super Bowl and, Coachella and all those big events, and so what we needed is the platform, and give you an idea of how we chose this platform, is that the important things for us were good video and audio quality, like no duh, right? Second thing was that we wanted the ability for anyone to tune in and ask questions easily, and for the host of the show to be able to see those questions and ask them to the person, right? Pretty simple, right? We decided eventually that, the intros and outro music and things like that was just we tried doing it live for a long period of time, but it was just so complicated for the host that we decided, no, we'll put it in post. That's for the recording, for the podcast apps, everything like that for YouTube, right? But instead the biggest thing is that it needs to look good. Also, easy is probably one of the criteria, and that we need the ability to pull those questions in. See, where StreamYard is good and why we chose it is actually we used Zoom for years. We actually used GoToWebinar at one point too, very sadly. But the reason why we love StreamYard is that we realized that for a while we used to gate all the ability for people to ask questions, so they had to give us their information, things like that. But honestly, it dropped our numbers down. We realized that the value wasn't necessarily watching live. All the value was creating this piece of content for people to enjoy on the podcast platforms later. So what we did is that StreamYard's great because it publishes to any social media website. So what's great about that, it does LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, almost every single live streaming platform out there. Only thing it doesn't do is Instagram Live yet. But the reason why, yeah, exactly. So reason why we're totally cool with it. No, nothing does. But one of the reasons why we chose it is that it allowed more people to tune in and ask more questions. It allowed us to get more questions in and engage more people. So that's why we ended up choosing that platform. So that's how you can start with like the why and why does it exist, which was obviously an AMA style event. Then we went into like the how do we need it? What do we need? Like what's our checklist for this? And then we chose our platform. Too many people are just going platform. Here's the features it has. I want those features. Now here's my why and how do I integrate all those as well. So that's how you can have that backwards mentality when it comes to it. So other platforms I recommend. So then the next step up from that's a very simple like live stream platform with a little bit of audience engagement system. The next step up is to be able to do an audience engagement system. As I'm about to sneeze. Woo!
God bless you.
Thank you. The next step is to do an audience engagement system and embed a live stream inside of it. So then that way you sometimes get a little bit more features, right? So here's a great example of this is an app called Slido. Slido is a polling and Q&A app. It actually technically does similarly what StreamYard does, which is allows people to submit questions, and then you can moderate them and things like that, right? What I like about Slido is that you also have the upvote functionality. So if you have like 1,000 people submitting questions, you tell them to upvote it, the best stuff rises to the top so you can get to it fastest, right? But what I also like about it has polling, it has this word cloud feature, it has all these things to kind of allow people when you're doing more traditional presentations to ask Q&A, to engage and things like that as well. Super duper easy. Then what we do is that we use personally our proprietary live stream platform that we embed within the Slido. However, you could also technically do it is in theory, like if you want to, you could embed like a Zeotag player inside. It's just a simple embed page in there. You can do YouTube Live, you can embed Facebook Live, you can embed any kind of live. If it makes a little embed code, you can embed it right within Slido, and boom, there you go. You just leveled up that live stream to have a little bit more engagement, right? And the engagement system is the container. The next step up for everyone is the ability to go full-scale virtual event platform. I'm not going to recommend any of them on right now because 3 months from now, there's going to be something better out there. They're getting better really rapidly because the market for virtual events used to be like 1%. Now it's 100%. So these softwares are moving so fast. In fact, some softwares that were primarily designed for in-person pivoted to virtual, and they're some of our favorite virtual systems now as well. So something to just kind of keep in mind is that the whatever someone said 6 months ago was the best, likely it's shifted already, right? So it's the wild, wild west right now. So full virtual event platforms, they do things like they do your registration as well. You know, they can do the Q&A. They do the live streaming. They might, for example, have the ability to have a schedule where people can click around and move into different sessions and things like that as well. It basically works as a container for everything. The idea behind it and the dream is to have one single login. They click on one thing and everything's on one site and clicking through. However, where I think is better and also where things are kind of leaning on right now is that instead what you're having is kind of the fourth level, which is multiple platforms integrated into each other. And this is my favorite way to do it instead, is that I don't think that there's a single platform that says I can do everything and it does it all well. It's definitely jack of all trades, master of none syndrome happening right now. Instead, what I recommend is find maybe a core system that does almost everything that you want to do, and then pick the pieces that are really going to separate your event to the next level. Maybe, for example, you have a platform that has your schedule and your live streams and, you know, a directory for attendees, but your breakout rooms happen within a I'm not going to use a breakout room software, but like a system that allows small group discussion and small group video conferencing. Then maybe, for example, your networking portion is in a separate app. And what I believe can happen is that this is where a virtual event production company can help, is they're going to integrate all the best technologies together. And so that's going to allow you to have the best of everything brought together rather than picking the jack of all trades as the master of none as well.
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Dude. Super helpful, and I love the way that like you're not just like rattling off tools, but you're giving the thought process behind how to choose the right tools, and that's really, I mean, dude, you are an amazing presenter. That's awesome value for everybody. Seriously, it's great. Yeah. All right, so the last thing I want to go through, and let me give some like kind of.
I can give tools, by the way. If people just want to hear like general, not necessarily virtual event tools, but if people just want to hear cool tools in general, I'm happy to always. I'm the app guy, as everyone says, so like I have like 1,000 bookmarks in the top. So if you're looking for like, you want to know the best to-do list software or something like that, like boom, I'll tell you what my favorite is right then and there. But yeah, I think right now with how fast everything's moving on the virtual side of things, definitely thought process is more important. So yeah, sorry, I totally interrupted.
No. So all right, now I want to talk about lastly like cost, value, and budgeting for stuff, right? So event producers, like, there's a budget for the venue, budget for, like you said, catering. There's a budget for speakers, right? Like, how much should speakers get paid? How much do you charge for the event that it's virtual versus in person? And I've heard, like, on the, speaker side of things, people talking about, like, well, normally I charge $5,000 to give a speech. And when they said they're switching to a virtual event, they said, well, how much is it going to be now? Like a few hundred or something. And it was like, well, I'm still delivering the same exact content and value that I was delivering on stage. It's no different here. So how do event planners, how do you think about budgeting for stuff like speakers and stuff like that? And how, then after you have all your budgeting and stuff, like, how do you charge and provide value for people who are like you said, I could just go on YouTube and look up this stuff versus what you would pay $1,000 to go to a conference?
Yeah, for sure. So I will say that in all theories, virtual events are cheaper than in-person events. I'm not going to deny that. However, there's now this gap between in-person and virtual. The gap between that is your production value, right? So, like, if you, for example, just want to have a live stream where someone's talking and gives a session, if you want to do that in person, you might have had to buy food for everybody, right? You might have had the room rental, the internet, whatever it may be. But now you have let's hop on live stream. In theory, you could do that with StreamYard and do it free and do it tomorrow, and anyone can tune in. No big deal, right?
Right.
But the production value is going to be the gap on there as well. And the difference is that if you don't give good production value, the value in general for your attendees is going to suck. They're not going to enjoy it. They're going to tune out, right? All those things like that as well. So where I recommend then when it comes to the cost, and I think where a lot of people are kind of getting stuck is, I just assume that it's cheaper. And that's where the problem is. So therefore, I do things like, for example, I tell my speakers I want to pay them less, all these things like that. And that's not okay. And the reason why that's not okay is that the people who are doing this really, really well said the exact same thing you said. Well, I'm delivering the exact same amount of value. I know how to rock a webcam. I know how to rock a Q&A software in Zoom. I know how to get everyone excited. And I think the thing is that I think it's okay to go to your presenter and say, hey, normally you charge $5,000 and we gave you a hotel and we gave you food vouchers and all these things like that as well. Now we'd like you to give the same presentation, not necessarily do it for $100, but maybe say can we do it for $2,500? And by the way, it's only an hour long, so you can do 2 of these in a day, and now you can maybe make back that money. Or, hey, I know another planner who might utilize you. Maybe I can refer you to them in return for a lower cost or something like that. I think that's where you get that negotiation in there, on there. I mean, no doubt. I mean, like, for example, I'm considering even as a presenter right now being like, man, I don't even want to speak at in-person events ever again. This is so much easier just to never leave my house, right, and have my setup. And I know the AV is going to always be great. Right. But I think the problem is that people are assuming that it's going to be cheaper. So then therefore they make it cheaper versus focusing on production value. So when it comes to charging then for the experience and what that looks like, I think that there's a lot of different ways to kind of approach this. So first thing that we have to keep in mind is that we already said to ourselves, instead of it being this short 1-day conference with 8 hours of content, it's probably now going to be instead 8 days of 1 hour of content potentially. Well, one of the things that I always thought about is for some of these really large conferences with 3-4 days of content, let's say 30 hours of content to make this really, really easy, right? We used to say, okay, that was $1,000, 33 days of 30 hours of content. Wow, it's 10 hours a day, all this value, everything like that. Well, now we're talking about how can we make them shorter, bite-sized chunks. So maybe it's 30 days of an hour of content. Well, what's great about this is now your timeline that you had for your event. It used to be impossible to have a 30-day long event. Can you imagine renting out a hotel or a conference center for 30 days? It would be absorbently expensive. But you can do that on the internet because bandwidth is cheap, hosting fees are cheap. These platforms are pretty relatively cheap, right? So, and also for me as a virtual event producer, if you say to me, I need the platform for 1 day versus 30 days, the cost for me to go 30 days is not that much more exorbitantly expensive. So what ends up happening is now you've figured out a way to extend out your content. Well, what I want people to start to think about is now that's the chance for you to challenge your current pricing model. Instead of you saying, hey, here, pay $1,000 for this one-time fee. And if you've ever watched anything for anyone to talk about business, everyone always talks about how can you turn it into more of recurring revenue and things like that as well. How can you stretch out instead of making it so it's $1,000 up front, which is really hard to get someone to buy? What if instead you made it $100 a month, times 10 months, right?
Yeah.
And now what you're doing is you're building a subscription. If you've ever read the book, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on the Automatic Customer. Thank you. I was like, man, I'm like totally thinking of a different book. But yeah, Automatic Customer. Automatic Customer talks all about how can businesses shift to these recurring revenue models, and everyone wants to move towards that. Now, as a planner, you have the ability to stretch out your content from being 1 day or 3 days to 30 days. Well, if you're doing smaller chunks, maybe you could do that every single month. And maybe instead you develop up a subscription model that is a membership to your event. Let's call it an event, but at that point it's something totally different.
Yeah.
And instead it's year-long worth of content. And boom, now it's easier for you to obtain customers. Boom. Now it's a lot easier for you to also do this. Instead of spending 3 months to prepare for 3 days, instead you're doing maybe an hour or two every day to kind of build it out. And you build that consistency when it comes to it. And I think that's where, not necessarily saying that you have to move a subscription model, but I think that people are not realizing that you're not building an event anymore. You're building an online community, and start to look at how the other online communities are doing it, who's successful and what's working well for them, and just copy their models.
And I think, that's a great point to end on too, is that, and I think with everything that's happened with the whole stay home initiative here, is that everything's been accelerated, and anyone who's at the top of their game thinking about from a serving standpoint, like any really good event planner, event producer should already have been thinking in person, how do we make this more of a community experience versus I'm coming to watch someone on stage. And so that same mindset is it's just more needed now, and it's accelerated people, and I think separating like the average event from a top of line event mentality, right?
Absolutely.
Dude, all right. Well, thank you so much. You've put out, this is just a serious masterclass on transitioning from in-person to virtual events. I think, people have watched through this, have everything they need to really get started on how to go from the mindset of we're going to have a live stream video to what a real, actual virtual experience can be for your event, and that's awesome. Thank you so much. So for people who do want to, obviously you're the go-to guy for this, right? Like you just proved that out over the last 40 minutes. So where can people get in touch with you, learn more, and get help on their events from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so again, if you didn't hear at the beginning, my name is Will Curran, Curran. Our company is called Endless Events. You can check us out at helloendless.com. We're huge believers in educating and getting all the content out there to help make people's lives easier. So you go there. We literally publish a blog post every single day. We have 3 podcasts. We do webinars every single week. They're literally, it's like a university on our website. So if you're looking to learn anything about events, helloendless.com. Worst thing you do is subscribe. We have an amazing handwritten newsletter we'll send you every week at minimum. So go check that out. That's a great place to start. And then, just feel free to reach out to me. I'm on all the social medias and things like that. I will admit that I am very, very busy right now, so I apologize if I don't get to you right away. But definitely, if you're looking to learn more, definitely the best place to start is helloendless.com. And, we do full virtual event production. So if you're looking for somebody who can build out your whole virtual experience, who can ask strategic questions and help you think about this and then execute it, we're your guys.
I love it. And if you guys are running events, you're obviously recording all of that content now that it's virtual, which you should be doing in person anyway. Head over to zeotag.com, sign up for a free account, upgrade to Pro, get all of your event videos auto-transcribed, fully searchable, and easy to navigate with an actionable table of content so that your attendees get 10 times more value out of all of that event content. And thank you very much, Will. Thanks, guys, for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.